Welcome, weary traveler. You've left the noise of the world behind and stepped into a realm untouched by time. Here, candlelight dances upon ancient stone walls, and the air carries the soft hum of forgotten lullabies. Beyond these gates, the night is gentle, and every story is a silver thread, weaving warmth around your heart. So rest your mind. Let each word be a quiet step into the halls of dreams, until sleep, tender and deep, finds you. You are safe here, and the world drifts away. Chapter 1: The Silent Knight's Arrival. In the heart of the kingdom of Elmswell, nestled within the rolling hills and vast forests, there lay a village where time moved like the gentle flow of a stream. The days were long and lazy, the nights filled with quiet whispers of the wind through the trees, and the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter here. It was a place untouched by the chaos of the world beyond, where the only sounds were the soft rustling of leaves, the gentle murmur of the stream, and the occasional distant song of birds welcoming the dawn. The village itself was small but proud. The homes, built from local stone with thatched roofs, dotted the landscape like gems scattered across the earth. The people of Elmswell were kind and content, living lives full of simple pleasures, tending to their gardens, gathering herbs in the meadows, sharing stories by the hearth, and listening to the quiet hum of nature. Everything in Elmswell seemed to breathe in harmony with the world, creating an atmosphere of peaceful stillness that wrapped itself around the village like a warm, familiar blanket. And it was in this very village that Sir Alden, a knight who had long since given up his sword for a quieter, simpler life, found his way. The sun had barely begun to rise when he arrived, casting a soft golden glow across the mist-covered fields. He had walked the long path from the northern forests, his steps steady but slow, as if he were savoring each moment of the journey. His armor, once gleaming with the polish of 100 battles, now seemed to blend seamlessly with the quiet surroundings. His once proud sword, sheathed at his side, had been left unpolished for many months, its blade no longer needed for the struggles of the world he had left behind. His shield, though still sturdy, was now a silent companion, rather than a symbol of defense. Sir Alden had chosen a different path, one of solitude and peace. He had traveled far and wide in his youth, his days spent fighting for causes that had seemed noble at the time. But in the quiet moments, as the years passed, he began to question the noise of the world, the clashing of swords, and the constant striving for something greater. It was during one of these moments of reflection, on a warm summer evening, that he had decided to leave the kingdom he once served and seek something more, something quieter. And so he had come to Elmswell. The village, with its slow-moving days and peaceful rhythms, had welcomed him with open arms. The people had never known him as a knight, only as a man who had wandered into their world in search of peace. They had accepted him as one of their own, never questioning the past he had left behind. To them, Sir Alden was not a warrior. He was simply a man who shared in their simple joys. The knight's first few days in Elmswell were quiet, filled with moments of contemplation. He had spent his mornings walking through the meadows, the tall grasses brushing against his legs, listening to the soft hum of life around him. He had wandered the cobbled streets of the village, admiring the way the houses were nestled against the hills, their stone walls worn smooth by time. At night, he sat by the fire with the villagers, sharing stories and laughter, feeling the warmth of the flames as they flickered and danced in the hearth. There was a sense of freedom here, a freedom that Sir Alden had never known before. The weight of his past seemed to dissolve with each passing day, and he found himself growing more content in this peaceful life. He woke with the sun, breathed in the crisp morning air, and allowed the quiet of the village to fill him with a sense of calm he had never known. It was on one such morning, when the first light of dawn broke over the hills and painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, that Sir Alden rose from his bed. The room was small but cozy, with a single window that overlooked the village square. The bed was simple but comfortable, made of soft woolen blankets and feather quilts. He stretched slowly, his limbs aching from the long walk the day before, but the soreness was not unpleasant. It was the kind of ache that spoke of a life well lived, of journeys taken and experiences gained. The light outside was soft and inviting, and the night could hear the faint chirp of birds in the distance, their songs greeting the new day. The air was cool, but not cold, and the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. It was the kind of morning that made one feel at peace with the world. Sir Alden rose and moved to the window, pushing it open to let the fresh air fill the room. The village lay before him, still and quiet in the early morning light. He could see the thin tendrils of mist rising from the meadows, swirling around the village like a dream. The houses, with their thatched roofs and stone walls, seemed to glow softly in the first light, and the distant hills beyond the village were bathed in a gentle golden hue. For a moment, Sir Alden simply stood there, breathing in the peace of the world around him. There was no urgency, no rush. The world seemed to pause, as if it, too, was savoring this moment of quiet serenity. The knight felt his chest rise and fall with each deep breath, and his heart settled into a rhythm that matched the calm of the world outside. He was in no hurry. There was no place to be, no task to complete. His journey was one of stillness, and for the first time in many years, Sir Alden felt truly at rest. He left the cottage quietly, the soft crunch of gravel beneath his feet the only sound as he stepped into the cool morning. The village was still, the streets empty except for the occasional bird flitting by or the rustle of a tree branch in the breeze. Sir Alden walked slowly, savoring the peace of the moment. His footsteps took him to the heart of the village, where the small fountain stood in the square, its waters sparkling in the light of the rising sun. There was something soothing about the rhythm of the water as it cascaded gently from the fountain's stone basin. Sir Alden paused for a moment, watching the droplets catch the light and fall in a perfect, never-ending dance. He felt no need to speak, no need to do anything other than be present, to witness the quiet beauty of the world around him. As he stood there, his thoughts turned inward. He thought of his past, of the battles he had fought and the places he had seen, but they seemed distant now, like a dream fading with the morning light. Here, in this small village, he was simply a man. No titles, no armor, no expectations. He was free to live each day as it came, and in that freedom, he found a peace that he had never known before. The morning unfolded around him, slow and steady, like the gentle flow of a stream. The birds continued to sing, the breeze whispered through the trees, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the earth below. Sir Alden stood by the fountain for a long while, allowing the calm of the village to seep into his bones. It was here, in this quiet village, that the knight would begin his new journey, not one of sword and shield, but one of stillness and reflection. Chapter 2. The Heart of the Village. As the sun continued its slow climb into the sky, casting a soft, golden light over Elmswell, Sir Alden began to feel a deeper connection to the village, a bond that was more than just a place, more than just a home. It was as if the very soil beneath his feet, The wind that whispered through the trees and the gentle murmurs of the stream had become a part of him, weaving themselves into the fabric of his soul. His thoughts, once filled with the clamor of distant battles and the weight of a past long left behind, had now turned toward the present, the simple joys of this peaceful life. The people of Elmswell, too, had become a part of his quiet journey. There was Alara, the elder of the village, whose warm presence was like the hearth that lit up the darkest corners of the room. She had welcomed him without question, with the kind of acceptance that only a true community could offer. There was Eamon, the blacksmith, whose strong hands shaped not only iron but also the heart of the village. And there were the children, their laughter ringing through the air like music, playing in the fields or sitting by the fountain, dipping their hands into the cool water as they whispered to one another. Sir Alden found himself spending more time with them, listening to their stories, joining in their quiet moments of laughter, and participating in the simple tasks that kept the village running smoothly. He was no longer a knight in shining armor, no longer a warrior. He was a friend, a companion, a part of the tapestry of Elmswell. Each day he walked the village, allowing his feet to follow wherever the path led. Sometimes he found himself by the edge of the stream, watching as the water swirled around the rocks, its surface reflecting the light of the sun. Other times, he wandered the meadows, inhaling the sweet scent of wildflowers that seemed to bloom just for him. He helped the villagers with their daily tasks, tending to the garden, carrying baskets of herbs to the village square, and, when the need arose, repairing the old stone walls that lined the streets. It was on one such afternoon, when the sun was at its highest, that Sir Alden found himself in the village square, sitting by the fountain, as he had done so many times before. The soft sound of the water cascading from the basin seemed to fill the space, creating a sense of calm that spread through the air like a gentle wave. As he sat there, Alara approached him, her steps slow and measured, her eyes filled with the wisdom of years lived in harmony with the earth. She smiled softly as she sat beside him, her gaze following his as they both looked at the flowing water. "You've found your peace here," Alara said, her voice as gentle as the breeze that rustled through the trees. "I can see it in the way you walk, in the way you listen to the world around you." Sir Alden nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I never knew peace could feel like this," he replied softly, his gaze still fixed on the water. "I spent so many years searching for something grand, something that would give my life meaning. But now I realized that it was never about the battles or the titles. It was always about this, the quiet moments, the stillness, the simple beauty of being alive." Alara's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've come home, Sir Alden, not just to the village, but to yourself. The world may be full of noise, but you've learned to hear the silence, to listen to your own heart." For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the water, the gentle rustling of leaves, and the quiet hum of the village. Sir Alden felt the weight of the years he had spent searching for something outside of himself slowly lift. The journey he had taken, both the physical one to Elmswell and the deeper, quieter journey within, had brought him to a place of peace. He had found what he had been looking for, though it had never been hidden in distant lands or grand quests. It had always been here, within him, waiting to be discovered. As the days passed, Sir Alden continued to immerse himself in the rhythm of village life. He found joy in the simple tasks, in the soft conversations by the hearth, in the quiet moments of contemplation that arose between laughter and shared meals. He spent more time with the villagers, learning their stories, hearing their hopes and dreams, and offering his presence as a friend and a companion. It was during one of these quiet moments that a thought began to take root in Sir Alden's mind, a question that had been quietly lingering in the background of his thoughts, waiting for the right moment to emerge. What if this was all there was? What if this peaceful life, this stillness, was the true meaning of it all? He had spent so many years searching for meaning outside of himself, for something that would bring him purpose, that he had never stopped to consider that the answer might lie in the quiet moments, in the peace he had found here. As the days turned into weeks, Sir Alden began to notice something subtle but profound. He had stopped thinking of himself as a knight, as a warrior. He was no longer defined by the battles he had fought or the armor he wore. He was simply a man, living a simple life in a village that had become his home. And in that realization, he found a deep sense of contentment. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, Sir Alden sat by the fountain once more. The village had quieted down for the night, the sounds of laughter and chatter fading into the distance. The stars above began to twinkle, casting their soft light over the world below. In that peaceful silence, Sir Alden realized that his journey was not over. It had only just begun. He had found peace, yes, but there was still much to learn, still much to discover about himself and the world around him. But for now, in this moment, there was no need to rush. There was only the gentle rhythm of the water, the whisper of the wind, and the quiet joy of simply being alive. And as he sat there, the soft breeze tugging at his hair and the stars above watching over him, Sir Alden knew that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Chapter 3, The Unspoken Bonds. The mornings in Elmswell were like a slow unfolding, a gentle stretching of the day as the first light of dawn kissed the earth. The village seemed to wake along with the sun, its people moving with soft purpose, each going about their morning rituals. Sir Alden, now a familiar face in the village, had adopted these quiet rhythms as his own, and every day felt like a continuation of a peaceful melody. One of Sir Alden's favorite moments was when he walked through the village square in the early morning hours, just as the first rays of light bathed the cobblestones. The air was always cool and crisp, the smell of fresh earth and blooming flowers mixing with the subtle scent of wood smoke rising from the chimneys. As the village began to stir, Sir Alden would make his way to the small bakery, where the warmth of freshly baked bread filled the air. The baker, a middle-aged man named Thomas, would greet him with a quiet smile and offer him a loaf still warm from the oven. "Morning, Sir Alden," Thomas would say, his voice low but steady. "The day's bread is ready for you, just as you like it." The knight would accept the loaf with a grateful nod, the simple act of receiving such a gesture of kindness filling him with warmth. He didn't need to speak much anymore. His presence was enough to be welcomed into this peaceful world. Thomas, too, had become a quiet companion on this journey, sharing moments of stillness between the kneading of dough and the tending of the fire. This morning was no different, except that Sir Alden, after taking his usual loaf, had decided to venture beyond the square. He felt the urge to explore deeper into the surrounding forest, a place he had walked through many times, but never with such intent. There was something about the trees, their towering branches reaching high into the sky, that called to him today. Perhaps it was the stillness of the woods that beckoned, or perhaps it was the feeling that he had yet to uncover all the peace the land had to offer. He made his way along the worn path, the crunch of leaves underfoot echoing in the quiet air. The forest, like the village, had its own rhythm. The breeze whispered through the trees, and the distant sound of a stream added its song to the symphony of the woods. As Sir Alden walked, he noticed the subtle patterns of life around him, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor, and the rustling of the branches as birds flew from tree to tree. It was a world that seemed to exist in perfect harmony, each element working together without effort or struggle. As he wandered deeper into the forest, Sir Alden found a small clearing, the trees parting to reveal a patch of soft grass that seemed to invite him to rest. He sat down slowly, the cool earth beneath him grounding him in a way that felt both familiar and new. There, in the heart of the forest, he closed his eyes and allowed the peacefulness of the world to wash over him. The sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, filled the air, and in that moment, Sir Alden felt more at home than he had in years. He sat in stillness for what seemed like hours, simply being. There was no urgency here, no need to accomplish anything. Time flowed differently in the forest. It was as though the trees themselves held the secret to peace, and Sir Alden had finally found a place where he could listen. But as the day passed and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Sir Alden felt the pull of the village again, the quiet call of his new life. He rose from the clearing, his steps lighter than they had been before, as if the forest had bestowed something upon him, something intangible yet deeply felt. Returning to Elmswell was always a quiet joy, but this evening, as he walked back toward the village, he was struck by a thought that had been lingering on the edges of his mind for some time. Who was he now? The Sir Alden who had first arrived in the village was a man burdened by the weight of the past. He had come to Elmswell in search of something, though he wasn't sure what. He had left behind a life of battles and duty, a life that had once been defined by his sword and his service to the kingdom. But now, after so many weeks in this peaceful village, he felt a shift within himself. The weight of his former identity had slowly lifted, like a heavy cloak discarded on the side of the road. The armor he had worn, both literal and metaphorical, no longer fit him. In the village, he was not Sir Alden, the knight. He was simply Alden, a man who had found solace in the stillness of the world, a man who had learned to listen more than he spoke, to live in the quiet moments. The sword that had once defined him now rested in his small cottage, a relic of a past that no longer felt like his own. As he neared the village square, Sir Alden was greeted by familiar faces. Alara waved from her spot by the fire, her face warm and welcoming, and Tomas, seeing him approach, nodded in greeting. The children were playing by the fountain, their laughter ringing through the air, and the village itself seemed to hum with a quiet energy. It was a rhythm he had become a part of, and as he stepped into the heart of it once more, he realized that he was content. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Sir Alden joined the villagers by the fire, the soft crackling of the flames joining the symphony of the night. The air had cooled, and the sky was deepening into shades of violet and indigo. The stars began to appear, their light soft and distant, like tiny points of hope in the vastness of the universe. As the night wore on, Sir Alden found himself beside Alara once again, sharing stories of times long past. But there was no urgency in their words, no desire to rush. The night stretched out before them like an open field, calm and unhurried. "You've found your place here, haven't you?" Alara asked quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper in the cool night air. Sir Alden smiled, the weight of the question falling gently upon him. "Yes," he said, his voice steady and calm. "I believe I have." And in that moment, as the fire flickered and the night wrapped its quiet arms around the village, Sir Alden knew that his journey was not one of grand achievements or battles won. It was a journey of stillness, of finding peace in the small things, the rustling of leaves, the warmth of a fire, the soft laughter of friends. It was a journey of simply being, and in that being, he had found something far more precious than any victory he had ever known. Chapter 4. The Gift of Quiet. The days in Elmswell continued to flow with the gentle rhythm of nature's own pace, each one blending seamlessly into the next. Sir Alden, now deeply woven into the fabric of village life, found himself more at peace with each passing moment. The once constant hum of ambition and duty that had filled his thoughts had quieted to a mere whisper, a distant echo that he no longer felt the need to answer. It was a freedom unlike any he had known, one that allowed him to simply be, without the need to strive or prove anything. It was a morning much like any other when Sir Alden received a gift, though at first, he didn't know it would be so. The sun had risen high in the sky, its golden light casting a soft glow over the fields as Sir Alden walked through the village. The breeze was gentle today, carrying with it the scent of fresh flowers and the earthiness of the soil. He had grown accustomed to the quiet beauty of Elmswell, the subtle shifts of the seasons, the changing light, the soft sounds that surrounded him. But today, something felt different, something he couldn't quite name, yet he felt it deep within him, as though the air itself was holding its breath. He had just passed by the blacksmith's forge, where Eamon was at work, hammering away at a piece of metal. The rhythmic clanging of the hammer against the anvil was a familiar sound, one that had become a part of the village's quiet soundtrack. Sir Alden smiled and nodded to Eamon, who returned the gesture with a grunt, his attention focused on his work. But as Sir Alden continued on his walk, he found himself drawn to the forest again. The path to the woods was well worn, the ground soft beneath his boots. As he approached the edge of the trees, the familiar peace of the forest washed over him like a blanket, the world beyond growing softer and more distant. He walked deeper into the forest than he had before, the sunlight filtering through the branches in delicate rays, casting patches of warmth upon the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the sound of the stream bubbling gently nearby added a soothing undertone to the quiet. Sir Alden felt his shoulders relax, the tension that so often clung to him from his past life dissolving as he walked further into the trees. It was in this quiet sanctuary, far from the village, that Sir Alden discovered the source of the change he had felt. There, in the heart of the forest, was a tree unlike any he had seen before. It was ancient, its trunk wide and gnarled, its roots twisting and curling into the earth like the fingers of a great hand. The tree was draped in vines, and its branches stretched high, as though it were reaching for the sky itself. But it wasn't the tree that caught Sir Alden's attention. It was the soft glow that surrounded it, a gentle light that seemed to pulse with life. Curious, Sir Alden stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat as he gazed upon the tree. The glow was not bright nor harsh. It was soft and warm, like the glow of the moon on a cloudless night or the flickering of a candle flame. It seemed to be alive, breathing in time with the earth itself. As he stood before the tree, Sir Alden felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him, a deep, almost sacred feeling that settled within his chest. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and touched the trunk of the tree. The moment his fingers made contact, a rush of warmth surged through him, and a quiet voice, soft as the wind, whispered in his mind, "You have come to find the quiet. Here, in this place, the stillness is a gift. It is yours if you are ready to receive it." Sir Alden's heart beat faster as the words echoed in his mind, though there was no one to speak them aloud. The voice was not of the world. He could feel it in his bones, a deep resonance that spoke to something ancient, something beyond words. He had heard nothing like it before, yet it felt as though he had always known it, as though he had always been waiting for it. He stood there for what seemed like hours, his hand resting against the ancient tree, feeling the warmth that flowed through him. It wasn't the warmth of the sun or the heat of the forge. It was something deeper, something far more profound. The tree's energy pulsed in time with his own heartbeat, each beat a reminder of his place in the world, of his connection to this quiet, sacred land. As the light around the tree dimmed, fading into the soft shadows of the evening, Sir Alden slowly withdrew his hand. He took a step back, his heart still racing with the aftershock of the experience, and looked up at the tree once more. There was a sense of finality in the air, as though the moment had come to an end, but the gift it had offered would remain with him. He didn't speak. There was no need for words. The quiet had already filled him, already settled into his soul. Sir Alden turned and made his way back to the village, his steps lighter, his heart fuller. He knew that the life he had found here, in Elmswell, was no accident. It was exactly where he was meant to be, and the quiet he had sought had finally embraced him in its full, unspoken beauty. That evening, as he sat by the fire with the villagers, the weight of his past life seemed more distant than ever before. He no longer needed to speak of his past or the battles he had fought. He was no longer defined by the sword or the shield, nor by the expectations of the kingdom he had once served. He was simply Alden, a man at peace with the world around him and with himself. Sir Alden's heart beat faster as the words echoed in his mind, though there was no one to speak them aloud. The voice was not of the world. He could feel it in his bones, a deep resonance that spoke to something ancient, something beyond words. He had heard nothing like it before, yet it felt as though he had always known it, as though he had always been waiting for it. He stood there for what seemed like hours, his hand resting against the ancient tree, feeling the warmth that flowed through him. It wasn't the warmth of the sun or the heat of the forge. It was something deeper, something far more profound. The tree's energy pulsed in time with his own heartbeat, each beat a reminder of his place in the world, of his connection to this quiet, sacred land. As the light around the tree dimmed, fading into the soft shadows of the evening, Sir Alden slowly withdrew his hand. He took a step back, his heart still racing with the aftershock of the experience, and looked up at the tree once more. There was a sense of finality in the air, as though the moment had come to an end, but the gift it had offered would remain with him. He didn't speak. There was no need for words. The quiet had already filled him, already settled into his soul. Sir Alden turned and made his way back to the village, his steps lighter, his heart fuller. He knew that the life he had found here, in Elmswell, was no accident. It was exactly where he was meant to be, and the quiet he had sought had finally embraced him in its full, unspoken beauty. That evening, as he sat by the fire with the villagers, the weight of his past life seemed more distant than ever before. He no longer needed to speak of his past or the battles he had fought. He was no longer defined by the sword or the shield, nor by the expectations of the kingdom he had once served. He was simply Alden, a man at peace with the world around him and with himself. As the fire crackled and the stars began to shine above, Sir Alden realized that the gift he had received in the forest was not something that could be given by any person or place. It was a gift he had found within himself, and it had been waiting for him all along, just as the quiet had always been there, waiting to be embraced. In that moment, Sir Alden knew that the journey he had undertaken was not about seeking greatness, but about finding peace in the small, sacred moments of life. And in this quiet village, surrounded by the simple beauty of nature and the warmth of friendship, he had found exactly what he had been searching for. Chapter 5, The Silent Knight's Legacy. The mornings in Elmswell always arrived with a certain tranquility, as if the sun itself stretched lazily across the sky, eager to embrace the earth with gentle warmth. Sir Alden, now deeply immersed in the rhythms of village life, had become an integral part of the landscape, like the rolling hills or the winding stream. He had learned that peace wasn't found in grand gestures or heroic deeds. It lay in the simplicity of living, the quiet hum of nature, and the shared bonds of community. But even in this idyllic setting, change was inevitable. Seasons shifted, and with them, so too did the lives of the villagers. Sir Alden had witnessed this cycle many times in his new life. Each season was a reminder of the passage of time, a subtle nudge that no matter how much peace one found, the world around them would continue to move forward. It was autumn when the first inklings of something new began to stir. The air, once warm and inviting, turned crisp with the arrival of the season's first chill. The trees shed their golden leaves in delicate spirals, carpeting the ground beneath them with a soft blanket of color. The village square became filled with the rich scent of fallen leaves and would smoke as the villagers prepared for the coming winter. Sir Alden had always loved autumn. It was a season that felt like a time of reflection, of looking back at the year that had passed and contemplating the quiet journey of the soul. He often walked through the village in the early mornings, the mist rising from the fields around him, reflecting on his journey. In his mind, the past seemed like a distant echo, its sharp edges dulled by the passage of time. The battles he had fought, the kingdoms he had served, those memories no longer held the weight they once had. Instead, his thoughts often turned to the people around him, the villagers who had quietly accepted him, and who, over the course of time, had become a new family to him. One afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Sir Alden found himself sitting beside Alara, the village elder. The fire crackled before them, its flames casting long, dancing shadows across the walls of the small cottage. Alara had grown older, and her steps were slower now, but her presence still carried a sense of wisdom that came with years of living in harmony with the world. "You've become a part of this village, Alden," Alara said softly, her voice as steady as ever. "Not just in the way you live, but in the way you've shaped us. You've taught us all something important. In your silence, in your stillness, you've shown us what true strength is." Sir Alden sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the flames. He had never sought to be a teacher, nor had he ever expected his way of life to have such an impact. He had simply come to the village to escape the noise of the world, to find peace within himself. Yet, as Alara's words sank in, he realized that something more had occurred. His quiet life had become a lesson not just to himself, but to the people of Elmswell. "The world moves quickly outside these walls," Alara continued, her eyes fixed on the flames. "But here we've learned that we can slow down, that peace can be found in the simplest moments. You've given us that gift, Alden." A warm feeling spread through Sir Alden's chest. For years, he had fought battles to protect kingdoms and honor his name. But here, in this small village, he had learned that the most important victories were not won on the battlefield. They were won in the quiet moments, in the act of simply being. Days passed, and the rhythm of life continued in Elmswell. The villagers went about their tasks, preparing for the winter that was approaching, while Sir Alden continued his daily routines. He helped Tomas with the baking, his hands growing familiar with the simple act of kneading dough. He worked alongside Eamon, the blacksmith, learning the quiet art of shaping metal. And in the evenings, he would sit by the fire with the villagers, sharing stories of old and listening to the laughter of the children who played in the square. Despite the contentment he felt in the village, there was a feeling deep within Sir Alden that lingered, a feeling that there was more to his journey. He had come to Elmswell to find peace, and in that peace, he had discovered a new sense of self. But as the seasons shifted, so too did his thoughts. There were moments when he would catch himself wondering, what was the true purpose of his life now? Was this peaceful existence enough? Or was there something more he needed to discover? One evening, as he sat by the village fountain, his thoughts turned inward. The sky had turned to hues of violet and indigo as the stars began to appear above. The air had grown cooler, the last traces of autumn giving way to the crisp bite of winter. The fountain's soft gurgling sound filled the silence, and the village square was empty, save for the occasional flutter of a bird's wings or the rustle of leaves. It was then that Alara appeared beside him, her movements slow but sure. She had a quiet presence about her, and Sir Alden had come to see her as more than just the village elder. She was a guide, a teacher of sorts, though not in the traditional sense. Her wisdom was not delivered in grand speeches, but in quiet words and moments of stillness. "Are you content, Alden?" Alara asked, her voice soft yet piercing. Sir Alden turned to her, surprised by the directness of the question. He had never fully voiced his inner thoughts, but now, in this moment, the question seemed to echo within him. "I am," he said slowly. "I have found peace here, something I never thought I would find. But, Alara prompted gently. "But I wonder if there's more," he confessed, his gaze drifting toward the distant hills. "I've left behind the world I once knew, the battles and the titles, and for a time that was enough. But now I find myself asking, what is my purpose here? What is the next step in my journey?" Alara regarded him thoughtfully, her eyes narrowing as if she were searching for something within him. Then, with a slow and deliberate movement, she reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have already discovered what many search for their entire lives," she said softly. "The purpose you seek is not something you will find through grand deeds or quests. It is something you must find within yourself, in the quiet moments. You have given the village peace, Alden, but now you must give yourself that same peace." Her words sank deep into his soul, as though a seed had been planted within him. Sir Alden had spent so many years seeking approval from the world, fighting for causes and battling for glory. But now, in this small village, he had found something far more profound. He had found peace, and perhaps that was enough. The following days were filled with a quiet sense of realization. Sir Alden no longer felt the need to seek purpose outside of himself. He had found a new way of living, one that didn't require battle or struggle. It was a life of acceptance, of living fully in each moment, and in that acceptance he found strength. It was on one such morning, as the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, that Sir Alden stood by the village square once again. The snow covered the cobblestones in a soft, white blanket, and the village seemed to glow with the purity of the season. As he watched the children run and play in the snow, their laughter filling the air, he felt a deep sense of contentment wash over him. He was no longer the knight who had sought glory on the battlefield. He was simply Alden, a man who had found peace in the quiet moments, in the simple joys of life. And in that peace, he had discovered his true legacy, not in the battles he had fought, but in the life he had built in Elmswell. As the days turned into weeks, Sir Alden's legacy in the village grew. The villagers continued to look to him for wisdom, but not the kind of wisdom that came from a life of battle. They sought the wisdom of a man who had learned to live with grace and stillness, a man who had discovered that true strength lay not in conquest, but in acceptance. And so, Sir Alden's journey continued, not one of external battles or grand victories, but a journey of quiet reflection, of finding peace in the small moments, and of leaving a legacy that would endure long after the snow had melted and the seasons had changed. Chapter 6: The Ripple of Change. Winter settled over Elmswell like a thick, comforting blanket, enveloping the village in quiet stillness. The first snowfall had transformed the landscape into a soft, glittering wonderland. The rooftops of the thatched cottages dusted with snow and the trees standing like silent sentinels, their bare branches etched against the pale winter sky. The world outside had become hushed, the usual sounds of life muted beneath the weight of the snow. Even the once bustling village square seemed to hold its breath, as if the season had paused time itself. For Sir Alden, it was a time of deep reflection. The stillness of winter mirrored the stillness he had cultivated within himself over the past months. He spent his mornings walking through the village, his boots crunching in the fresh snow, admiring the peaceful landscape that had come to feel like home. The cold air filled his lungs, sharp and invigorating, a reminder of the simple beauty of the world around him. But even in this peaceful existence, Sir Alden began to sense a subtle shift. The villagers, who had once been content with the quiet rhythm of their lives, now seemed to be feeling the weight of the season. The long nights and the unrelenting cold seemed to stir something within them, a longing for something more. The fire in the hearths burned brighter, and the sound of voices gathered around the dinner tables grew louder, as if the villagers were seeking warmth not only from the flames but from one another. Sir Alden observed this change with a quiet sense of understanding. He had always known that peace, while precious, could not exist in isolation. The stillness he had embraced was not meant to be a withdrawal from the world, but a way of being fully present in it. It was not an escape, but an invitation to live with greater awareness, to listen more closely to the needs of those around him. One evening, as he sat by the fire in his small cottage, a knock came at his door. It was a sound that had become rare in his quiet life, but tonight it seemed to carry an urgency that cut through the stillness. When Sir Alden opened the door, he found Alara standing on the threshold, her face pale from the cold, but her eyes burning with an intensity he had not seen before. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her movements quick and purposeful. "Alden," she said, her voice tight with emotion, "there is something happening in the village. Something I cannot ignore." Sir Alden closed the door behind her and gestured for her to sit by the fire. "What's troubling you, Alara?" She didn't immediately sit, but instead began pacing, her hands wringing together as if to release the tension that had taken root within her. "It's the village," she said. "The peace we've found, the quiet we've built. It's starting to feel stagnant. The people are restless, Alden. They've grown complacent and it's wearing on them. They no longer know how to move forward." Sir Alden's brow furrowed, his eyes following her as she moved around the room. "Restlessness? But the village has always been at peace. What has changed?" Alara stopped pacing and turned to face him. "It's not the kind of restlessness you might think. It's not a desire for conflict or noise. It's a hunger for something more, something beyond the life we've built here. We've been living in harmony with nature, yes, but we've forgotten what it means to truly live, to grow, to evolve." Sir Alden listened intently, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, he realized that the village, while peaceful, had become stagnant in its own way. The same routines were repeated day in and day out, and while there was comfort in that, there was no longer a sense of purpose or forward movement. The village was no longer growing, it was merely existing. "But how can we move forward?" Sir Alden asked, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. "What is it that the village needs?" Alara looked him in the eye, her expression fierce. "They need guidance, Alden, not just in matters of daily life, but in how to move beyond the peace we found. They need a vision for the future, something that will spark their spirits and rekindle their sense of purpose." Sir Alden sat back, the firelight flickering in his eyes. He had come to Elmswell seeking peace, and he had found it, more than he had ever imagined. But now, as Alara spoke, he realized that peace was only one part of life. The other part, the part that had been buried beneath the years of battle and duty, was the need for growth, for change, for something that would propel the village forward. "I see," Sir Alden said quietly, "but how can I help? I have no experience in leading a village, in guiding them to what they need. I've spent my life fighting wars, not building futures." Alara's eyes softened, and she took a step closer to him. "You don't need experience, Alden. You've already shown the village how to live in peace. Now, you must show them how to live with purpose. Your stillness has been your strength, but now you must show them the power of movement, the power of change." Sir Alden was silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. He had spent so many years running from the chaos of the world, seeking only to find peace. But now, peace had come to him, and it had brought with it a new challenge. The challenge of growth, of moving forward, of finding purpose in the stillness. Alara seemed to read his thoughts. "I know it is not an easy task, Alden. Change never is. But the village needs you. They need someone to help them see that peace does not mean stagnation. It means balance, between stillness and motion, between rest and action." The weight of her words settled over him like a mantle. He had always believed that peace was an end in itself, the final destination after a lifetime of struggle. But now he understood that peace was not an endpoint. It was a foundation, and from that foundation something new could be built. "I will do it," Sir Alden said finally, his voice steady. "I will help the village find its way forward." Alara nodded, her face filled with a quiet pride. "I knew you would, Alden. You have the heart of a leader, even if you have never seen it before. Trust yourself and the people will follow." The days that followed were filled with a sense of quiet anticipation. Sir Alden walked the village with renewed purpose, listening to the villagers, learning their hopes and dreams. He spent time with Tomas, the baker, and Amen, the blacksmith, talking not just of their work but of their desires for the future. He spoke with the children, asking them what they imagined for their village, for their lives. And he listened to Alara, who guided him with her wisdom, helping him see that the first step toward change was not force, but understanding. Together, they began to craft a new vision for Elmswell, one that would balance the peace they had found with the growth they needed. It was not a vision of conquest or expansion, but one of inward growth, a growth that would lead the villagers to discover new strengths within themselves, to cultivate new talents, and to forge deeper connections with one another. The first sign of change came during the village's winter festival. Sir Alden, alongside Alara and the other villagers, organized a gathering unlike any before it. It wasn't just a celebration of the season. It was a celebration of the village's potential. There were games, of course, and songs and plenty of food, but there were also discussions and workshops where villagers could share their skills and dreams. He had always believed that peace was an end in itself, the final destination after a lifetime of struggle. But now, he understood that peace was not an endpoint. It was a foundation, and from that foundation, something new could be built. "I will do it," Sir Alden said finally, his voice steady. "I will help the village find its way forward." Alara nodded, her face filled with a quiet pride. "I knew you would, Alden. You have the heart of a leader, even if you have never seen it before. Trust yourself and the people will follow." The days that followed were filled with a sense of quiet anticipation. Sir Alden walked the village with renewed purpose, listening to the villagers, learning their hopes and dreams. He spent time with Tomas, the baker, and Amen, the blacksmith, talking not just of their work but of their desires for the future. He spoke with the children, asking them what they imagined for their village, for their lives. And he listened to Alara, who guided him with her wisdom, helping him see that the first step toward change was not force, but understanding. Together, they began to craft a new vision for Elmswell, one that would balance the peace they had found with the growth they needed. It was not a vision of conquest or expansion, but one of inward growth, a growth that would lead the villagers to discover new strengths within themselves, to cultivate new talents, and to forge deeper connections with one another. The first sign of change came during the village's winter festival. Sir Alden, alongside Alara and the other villagers, organized a gathering unlike any before it. It wasn't just a celebration of the season. It was a celebration of the village's potential. There were games, of course, and songs and plenty of food, but there were also discussions and workshops where villagers could share their skills and dreams. The fire in the center of the square burned brighter than ever, and the stars above seemed to shine a little more brightly as well. As Sir Alden watched the villagers come together, he realized that this was the beginning of something new. The village was no longer just a place of peace, it was a place of possibility. And with that possibility came the greatest gift of all, hope for the future. Chapter 7. The Spark of Renewal. The quiet rhythms of Elmswell had been irrevocably altered by the events of the past few weeks. The winter festival had marked a turning point, an awakening of sorts for the villagers. It was as if the first true breath of fresh air had filled the village after months of stillness. What had once been a community bound by peace and routine now buzzed with new energy. An energy that sought to break free from the constraints of complacency. Sir Alden had felt it the moment the festival ended. The subtle shifts in the air, the conversations among the villagers, the gleam in their eyes as they looked toward the future. There was a restlessness, yes, but it was no longer a restless hunger for something unknown. It was a fire, kindled by the collective desire to move forward, to build something greater than just a peaceful existence. They were beginning to understand that peace could coexist with purpose. The two were not opposites. They were partners. The village, it seemed, had caught the spark of renewal that Alden had hoped for. The idea that they were not simply surviving but thriving, that there was a place for growth even in the most tranquil of environments, had taken root in their hearts. The once muted conversations around the fire had evolved into planning sessions for the village's future. Ideas began to flow like the stream that wound its way through Elmswell, softly but steadily, gathering strength as they went. Sir Alden, still grounded in the stillness he had embraced, could feel the urgency and excitement of the village's new direction. He had become more than a figure of peace. He was now a guide, a leader in the truest sense of the word. But unlike the knights he had once known, he led not with a sword or command, but with a quiet strength that stemmed from his ability to listen, to understand, and to nurture. It was a bright morning, the sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered village square, when Sir Alden decided it was time to meet with Alara again. Her wisdom had been instrumental in helping him understand the deeper currents of change that were running through the village. He needed her insight now more than ever, for as the village moved toward this new chapter, there were questions about how to shape their growth without losing the heart of what made Elmswell so special. He found her by the fire, as always, her gnarled hands busy with some small task. She looked up when he entered, a knowing smile on her face as though she had been expecting him. "Alden," she said warmly, "you've come to seek advice, I presume?" He nodded, taking a seat beside her. The fire crackled between them, sending small sparks into the air. The village has changed, Elara. There's a new energy, a new sense of purpose. But I'm unsure how to guide them. How do we move forward without losing the essence of who we are? Elara leaned back, her gaze thoughtful. That is the question, isn't it? She said softly. You've already begun the work, Alden. You've helped the villagers realize that peace doesn't come from doing nothing. It comes from living with purpose. The challenge now is finding the balance between what was and what will be. Alden's brow furrowed as he listened. But how do we define that purpose? The villagers have many ideas, many dreams. Some wish to improve the village's trade. Others want to expand their gardens, and some even dream of reaching out to other villages. There is so much they want to do, but I fear they will spread themselves too thin. Elara's eyes twinkled with quiet amusement. The key, Alden, is not to restrict their dreams, but to help them see how they can work together. A village is like a tree. It grows in many directions, but each branch must support the others. Trade, gardening, community outreach, all of these things can work together, but only if there is a unified vision. Unified vision, Alden repeated thoughtfully. How do we create that? Elara paused for a moment, staring into the flames. You must begin by asking the villagers what they want for their future. Not just their individual goals, but what they want as a collective. What is the soul of Elmswell? What do they all hope to achieve together? Sir Alden's heart stirred at her words. It was true. The village was growing, but the only way to ensure their growth was sustainable was to weave their individual hopes and dreams into one shared tapestry. Each person's contribution would matter, but the whole could only thrive if it moved forward as one. With a deep breath, Alden stood up. Thank you, Elara. I think I know what I must do. As he walked out into the snow-covered village, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fire of change had been kindled, but it needed direction. And it was up to him, along with the villagers, to help guide that flame. Over the next several days, Sir Alden spent time with each of the villagers, speaking with them not only about their individual desires, but also about what they envisioned for Elmswell as a whole. Tomas, the baker, expressed his hope to increase the village's trade and make Elmswell known for its exceptional bread. Eamon, the blacksmith, dreamed of expanding his forge and creating tools not only for the village but for others in nearby regions. The children, their laughter echoing through the square, spoke of building a larger library so they could learn about the world beyond their hills. Each conversation, though filled with different dreams, revealed a common thread, a desire for growth and connection. They did not want to remain isolated. They wanted to contribute to something larger, something that would endure beyond their lifetimes. But what struck Alden most was the quiet but profound words of the village's elder women, those who had lived through decades of hardship and peace. One afternoon, as he sat with them in the warm glow of the community hall, an old woman named Mara said something that would stay with him forever. The world outside these hills may be loud and busy, Alden, she said, her voice low but filled with wisdom. But we have something here they don't. We have the space to listen, to pause, to consider. Elmswell's future doesn't have to be a rush to change. It can be a steady journey, but it must start with understanding. Understanding what we have and what we want to protect. Her words resonated deeply with Sir Alden. Change was necessary, but it had to come from within, from a place of clarity and understanding. The villagers needed to acknowledge the quiet strength that had built their community before they could set out to build something new. And so, Sir Alden gathered the villagers together one crisp evening beneath the bare trees of the village square. The air was cool, but there was a warmth in the gathering of so many people, united in their purpose. He addressed them with the quiet confidence that had come from months of reflection and connection. "We stand at a crossroads, my friends," Sir Alden began. "Elmswell has always been a place of peace, a sanctuary from the noise of the outside world. But now we find ourselves at a time of great change. The peace we found is not a peace of stagnation. It is a peace that allows us to grow, to nurture our dreams, and to build something together." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The villagers listened intently, their eyes focused on him. "Our future lies not in the pursuits of any one person," he continued, "but in the strength we find together. Each of you has a dream for this village. But now we must ask ourselves, what is the shared dream of Elmswell? What will we create together that will endure for generations?" There was a hushed silence in the square as the villagers looked at one another, the firelight reflecting in their eyes. It was a moment of quiet contemplation, a moment of understanding. Then, slowly, the voices began to rise, speaking not only of what they wanted for themselves, but of what they wanted for their community. Together, they began to craft a vision of Elmswell as a thriving, interconnected village that would serve as a beacon of peace, purpose, and growth. They would increase trade, share their talents with nearby villages, and continue to nurture the land that had given them so much. But above all, they would remain united in their understanding that peace, like any living thing, must be cared for and nurtured in order to grow. As the evening wore on, Sir Alden stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of his responsibility. He had come to Elmswell seeking peace, and in that peace, he had found purpose. But now, as the village moved forward, it was clear that his journey was far from over. The flame of change had been lit, and it was his task to help it grow, to guide it with the same steady hand that had once held a sword in defense of a kingdom. The village had sparked a renewal, but the journey, Alden knew, was just beginning. Chapter 8, The Seeds of Change. As winter's grip slowly began to loosen, the first hints of spring crept into Elmswell. The snow that had blanketed the village for so long melted into rivulets, feeding the earth that lay dormant beneath it. The once bare trees began to bud, tiny green shoots peeking through the earth as though the world itself was awakening after a long, peaceful slumber. The village square, which had been a silent witness to the cold, now came alive with the sound of laughter and the murmur of conversations about what lay ahead. It was a time of transition, of renewal. The villagers, once content with the rhythm of their daily lives, were now eager to embrace the future. They were united in their vision, their collective hope for Elmswell's future, and Sir Alden stood at the heart of it all, the quiet guide who had brought them to this point. But now the real work was beginning. They had a vision, yes, but turning it into reality would take effort, sacrifice, and, above all, patience. Alden could feel the weight of this responsibility on his shoulders. There was no grand strategy, no one clear path that could be followed. The future of Elmswell was not something that could be mapped out in a single day. It was something that would take time, something that needed to be nurtured, just like the seeds of the coming spring. And so, he spent his days walking the village, speaking with the villagers, encouraging them to take the first steps toward their collective dream. Tomas, the baker, had already begun working on expanding his business, eager to bring his famous bread to nearby villages. Eamon, the blacksmith, was designing new tools, ones that could help Elmswell grow its agriculture and craftsmanship. The children had begun collecting stories and learning from elders, with plans to create a small library that would be the cornerstone of the village's future education. But it was not all easy. Change, as Alden had come to understand, was never as simple as it seemed. There were disagreements among the villagers about how to proceed, which path to take first. Some wanted to focus on trade, others on improving the village's self-sufficiency. Some felt the village should remain focused on its peaceful existence, while others yearned for expansion, for a life that stretched beyond their quiet hills. One chilly morning, as Alden walked through the village square, he overheard a conversation between Mara, the elder, and some of the younger villagers. Their voices were raised, their words filled with tension. "This is not what we signed up for, Mara." One of the younger men, Rian, said, his voice edged with frustration. "We've been living in peace for so long. Now we're talking about opening trade routes, bringing in goods from outside. Who knows what kind of trouble that will bring?" Mara, whose wrinkled face held the weight of years of wisdom, replied in her usual calm tone, "Rian, we are not abandoning our peace. We are simply choosing to share what we have. There is no reason why our village cannot remain true to its values and still grow." But Rian was unconvinced. "But change doesn't always bring peace, Mara. We've seen what happens when people step outside their boundaries. What if we bring in conflict? What if we're overwhelmed by the noise of the world?" Alden paused a moment, watching the exchange from a distance. He had been a soldier, had seen firsthand the impact of change. Often violent, often unpredictable. He understood Rian's fears, but he also knew that peace, while valuable, could not be sustained without growth, without progress. The question was not whether change would come, but how they would embrace it. After a few moments of silence, he approached the group. His presence quieted the conversation, and Mara gave him a knowing smile. "Rian, I understand your concerns," Alden said softly, his voice calm but firm. "Change is not without risk, but without change, there is stagnation. Elmswell is a place of peace, yes, but that peace cannot be a prison. We must grow, or we risk fading into nothingness." Rian looked at him, his brow furrowed. "And how do we know that we won't lose what makes us who we are? How do we know that this growth won't destroy us?" Alden took a deep breath. "Growth is a delicate thing, just like the crops we plant in the fields. If we do not tend to them, they will wither. But if we water them, care for them, and give them time to grow, they will flourish. It is the same with our village. We must nurture our future with the same care we give to our peace." The group fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them like a gentle rain. After a moment, Rian spoke again, though his tone was softer. "I understand, Alden, but I fear that in trying to grow, we might forget what makes us unique, what makes us strong." Alden smiled. "That is why we must define that strength. We must remember who we are and what we value. Elmswell's strength lies in its simplicity, in the quiet, in the way we live. But that strength does not mean we must remain stagnant. We can grow and still hold on to what matters most." Rian nodded slowly, the skepticism in his eyes replaced by thoughtfulness. "I will think on it, Alden." Alden placed a hand on his shoulder. "That is all I ask." As the days passed, the village continued to move forward, albeit with some caution. The fears and doubts that had been raised were not easily dismissed, but they were addressed with honesty, with open dialogue. Sir Alden continued to meet with the villagers, helping them to come together as they discussed how to balance the changes they sought with the preservation of their core values. The peace of Elmswell was not something that could be shattered by the winds of progress. It was something that could be built upon, strengthened, and shared. The first sign of change came with the opening of the village's first market day. Tomas had successfully secured a trade route with a nearby town, and the village square, once a quiet haven, was now filled with merchants, goods, and new faces. The villagers of Elmswell had come together to create a small but thriving marketplace that showcased the skills of the community. There were baskets of fresh vegetables, beautifully crafted tools, handmade pottery, and, of course, Tomas's famous bread. But it wasn't just the goods that drew attention. It was the sense of unity that had blossomed in the village. As Alden walked through the bustling square, he could see the pride in the villagers' eyes. They were no longer simply survivors of their peaceful existence. They were active participants in the future of their community. The market was a testament to their collective effort, to the strength they had built together. Later that evening, as the market stalls were packed up and the square emptied, Alden found himself once again by the fountain. The cold air nipped at his skin, but he didn't mind. He had never felt more alive. Mara joined him, her footsteps quiet on the cobblestone. "The village is changing, Alden," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. "I know," he replied, "but it is not changing into something unrecognizable. It is becoming what it was always meant to be, a place where peace and purpose can coexist." Mara smiled, her eyes shining with approval. "You've done well, Alden. The village will flourish because you helped them see that peace is not an end, but a foundation." Alden turned to look at her, his heart full. "I couldn't have done it alone. This village is strong because of everyone who lives here." As the stars began to shine overhead, Alden felt the weight of the future no longer as a burden, but as a promise. The seeds of change had been planted in Elmswell, and they were beginning to sprout. But Alden knew that it was not the change itself that mattered. What mattered was how they embraced it, with patience, with understanding, and with the quiet strength that had always defined them. The journey was far from over, but in that moment, Alden felt a deep sense of peace. Not because the village had found its way, but because it had found a way forward together. Chapter 9, The Test of Harmony. Spring arrived in Elmswell with the same quiet grace that the seasons always brought to the village. The days grew longer, and the earth, once covered by the soft embrace of snow, now stretched out with new life. The village, too, seemed to have been reborn, its heart beating to a rhythm that spoke of growth, of progress, and of a new understanding of what peace truly meant. But even in the tranquility of the village, there were challenges ahead. As Elmswell flourished, it became clear that change, though welcomed, was not always as simple as it seemed. There were moments when the pull of old habits tugged at the villagers, when the fear of the unknown crept in. The balance between maintaining the peace that had long defined them and embracing the progress they now sought was fragile. And as the village took its first steps into this new chapter, Sir Alden knew that it would not be without its tests. One crisp morning, as the sun cast its golden light across the village square, Alden stood by the fountain, reflecting on the village's progress. The first market day had been a resounding success, with traders coming from nearby towns, eager to share their goods and hear the stories of Elmswell's transformation. The once quiet village was now a place of opportunity, a place where change was no longer feared but embraced. But as Alden watched the villagers begin their daily tasks, he noticed a shift. Tomas, the baker, no longer greeted him with the same cheerful enthusiasm. Eamon, the blacksmith, seemed distant, his focus shifting toward the forge rather than the community. The energy that had once been so vibrant now felt fragmented, as if the threads that held the village together were beginning to fray. It was Mara, as always, who noticed the tension first. The village's elder had seen many seasons pass, and her wisdom was as sharp as ever. She approached Alden quietly, her footsteps soft on the cobblestone. "I've been watching, Alden," she said, her voice laced with concern. "The village is changing, yes, but there is a quiet unease that is spreading. Not everyone is ready for what lies ahead." Alden sighed, the weight of her words settling over him. "I felt it too, Mara. The excitement, the hope. It's all still here, but there's something beneath the surface. A hesitation. I'm not sure where it's coming from." Mara's eyes narrowed, as if she were piecing together a puzzle in her mind. "It's not uncommon, Alden. Change, especially one that happens so quickly, can be overwhelming. Some are ready to embrace it, while others are still clinging to what they've always known. It's the fear of losing the familiar, the fear of what might be sacrificed in pursuit of progress." Alden nodded, understanding what she meant. The village had spent years in peaceful isolation, content with their simple way of life. Now, they were stepping into the unknown, and not everyone was certain that the journey was worth the risk. The fear of losing their identity, their very essence, was a powerful force. "I don't want to see the village unravel, Mara," Alden said, his voice low. "I've worked so hard to help them understand that growth doesn't mean abandoning what we have. But how can I show them that when they're still afraid of what lies ahead?" Mara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm and reassuring. "The path ahead is not always clear, Alden, but you've already shown them what peace can be. Now, you must show them what it means to hold onto that peace while moving forward. You don't have to have all the answers. You only need to guide them through their fears." Alden looked out over the village, his thoughts swirling. He had come to Elmswell seeking peace, but now, he realized, his journey was far from over. He had to help the village navigate the waters of change, to show them that peace could be a foundation for progress, not a hindrance to it. The question, however, was how. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alden gathered the villagers by the fountain. The air was cool, the sky painted in shades of pink and purple, but there was a palpable tension in the crowd. The market had been successful, but there was no denying the undercurrent of anxiety that lingered in the air. Mara stood beside him, her presence a steady anchor. As Alden looked out over the faces of the villagers, he felt the weight of the moment. This was more than just a speech, it was a turning point, a chance for the village to truly embrace the future, or to retreat back into the safety of the past. "I know there is fear among us," Alden began, his voice carrying through the quiet evening. "I can feel it, and I know you all can too. Change is not easy. We've spent our lives in peace, in simplicity, and now, as we move forward, there is uncertainty. The future we are creating may look very different from the world we've always known." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The villagers were listening, their faces open and eager for guidance. "But I want to remind you all of something," Alden continued. "The peace we've known in Elmswell is not a peace born of stagnation. It's a peace that comes from our ability to adapt, to grow, to find balance in every season of life. And this is just another season, one that we must embrace together." Eamon, the blacksmith, stepped forward, his face tight with concern. "But what about the cost, Alden?" he asked, his voice raw. "What are we willing to lose in pursuit of this change? Can we really move forward without losing ourselves in the process?" Alden met his gaze, understanding the fear that lay beneath the question. He had felt it too, the fear that in reaching for something new, they might lose the very essence of what made Elmswell special. The seeds of change had been sown in Elmswell, and they were beginning to take root. The village had faced its first test, and though it had faltered for a moment, it had emerged stronger, more united in its resolve to move forward. The test of harmony was not one of perfection, but of balance. It was about embracing the future without abandoning the past. And with that balance, Elmswell would continue to thrive, not just as a village of peace, but as a village of purpose. Chapter 10. The Dawn of a New Era. The first rays of dawn stretched across Elmswell, spilling their soft golden light over the village as though the world itself was waking up gently, almost as if it too had spent a long night in quiet reflection. The snow that had once blanketed the village like a thick, soft blanket was now little more than a memory, retreating into the earth beneath the stirring green shoots of spring. The hills, once silent and still under a cover of winter frost, were now alive with the murmur of life returning to the land. The trees, heavy with buds and new growth, reached up to the sky, while the streams, thawed and running full from the melting snow, glistened as they made their way through the village. For Sir Alden, this spring felt different. It was more than just the turning of a season. It felt like a metaphor for everything that had happened in Elmswell. He had arrived here so many months ago, seeking peace, and now, standing on the edge of the village square, he realized that peace had been found, not just for him, but for the entire village. But there was something more, something that had begun to take root deep in the hearts of the villagers. The understanding that peace was not something to be simply enjoyed. It was something to be shared, built upon, and carried forward. Alden had watched as the village had changed, subtly at first, as the villagers began to open their eyes to the possibility of growth. He had watched them take tentative steps toward a future they had never before considered. The village had always been a quiet refuge from the noise of the outside world, and for so long, they had been content to stay in their peaceful existence. But under the surface, there had been a longing for something more, something beyond the boundaries of their small world. They were ready to expand, to share what they had, to make their mark on the world. That journey had not been easy. Change, as always, came with its fears and uncertainties. There had been moments when Alden feared that the village would retreat back into its old ways, hesitant and uncertain about the future. He had seen the doubts in the eyes of the villagers, the fear of losing their identity, their peace in the pursuit of something new. And yet, he had also seen the spark of hope that burned brightly in the hearts of those willing to take that next step. Now, as he stood in the village square, watching the familiar faces of the villagers begin their daily routines, Alden couldn't help but smile. The market had grown, the first real sign of change and progress. It was no longer just a place for simple goods and shared stories. Now it was a thriving hub of activity, where merchants and farmers from nearby towns came to trade, and Elmswell's artisans displayed their goods with pride. The once sleepy village was alive with energy, an energy that was grounded in the peace they had always known but fueled by the excitement of possibility. Yet, even in this vibrancy, Alden knew the true test was ahead. The village had made it this far, but maintaining this balance between peace and progress, between staying true to their values and embracing the future, would require constant attention. There was no easy answer to how Elmswell would continue to grow, but he knew one thing for sure. It would be a journey they would take together. That evening, after a long day spent in the village square, Alden found himself walking alone through the meadows that stretched beyond the village. The cool spring air brushed against his skin, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. The sun was dipping low in the sky, casting long shadows across the field, and Alden couldn't help but pause for a moment to watch as the light transformed the landscape. It was a beautiful sight, one that always made him feel a sense of peace that words could never capture. It was during moments like these, in the quiet solitude of nature, that Alden's thoughts would turn inward. He thought about the journey that had brought him to Elmswell, the battles, the years of searching, the endless striving for something greater, something meaningful. He had once believed that purpose was something found only through struggle, through conflict. But now, standing in the golden light of the setting sun, he understood. Purpose wasn't something that needed to be fought for. It was something that could be found in the simplest of moments, in the everyday acts of kindness and cooperation that bound people together. As he walked deeper into the meadows, Alden thought about the village's future. He had done his best to guide them, to help them see that peace was not an end but a beginning. But he also knew that there was no magic formula for success. Change, progress, and growth would continue to come, sometimes in waves, sometimes in small steps, but always with the need for balance. When Alden returned to the village later that evening, he found himself standing by the fountain in the village square, as he often did when he needed to think. The square was quiet now, the last of the merchants packing up their goods, the light from the lamps casting a soft glow over the cobblestones. And there, standing in the fading light of the evening, was Mara, the elder whose wisdom had been such a guiding force for him throughout his journey. "You've been thinking again, haven't you?" Mara said, her voice calm and knowing, as she joined him at the fountain. Alden smiled, knowing exactly what she meant. "I suppose I've been thinking about the future." "Of course you have," Mara replied softly, settling beside him. "The future is always on our minds, especially when we've worked so hard to build something. But you know as well as I do, Alden, that it's not the future that matters most. It's the present. The work we do today, the choices we make right now, are what will shape tomorrow." He nodded slowly, understanding. "You're right. I've spent so much time focusing on the bigger picture that I've almost forgotten to appreciate the small moments. The village is moving forward, and I've helped them see that. But I must remember that it's the daily choices, the simple acts of kindness and connection, that will define us." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes warm with pride. "You've done more than that, Alden. You've helped them understand what it means to live with purpose, to move forward without losing who they are. That is no small feat." Alden looked out over the village, his heart swelling with a quiet pride. The journey had not been easy, but in the end, it had been worth it. The village was stronger now, more united than it had ever been. They had found a way to balance peace and purpose, to grow without losing their essence. And it was in that balance that Elmswell would continue to thrive, not just as a village of peace, but as a village of hope, connection, and endless possibility. "I think," Alden said softly, his voice filled with quiet certainty, "that Elmswell has become something more than I could have ever dreamed. It's a place where peace isn't just something we seek, but something we live. And I believe that, in time, others will come here, not just to visit, but to learn, to see how peace and progress can work together." Mara smiled, her eyes twinkling. "That, Alden, is the greatest gift you've given this village. Not just the peace we've found, but the understanding that peace is the foundation of everything else. And that foundation will carry them forward for generations to come." As Alden stood there, the village bathed in the soft glow of twilight, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found what he had been searching for, but it had not been in the way he had expected. The peace he had sought had never been an escape from the world, but a way to engage with it more fully, more meaningfully. And now, as Elmswell moved forward into a new era, he knew that the journey of peace would continue, not just for him, but for all those who called this village home. In the quiet of that evening, With the stars beginning to twinkle overhead and the sound of the village settling into the rhythms of night, Alden understood. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. A new chapter in a story that had only just begun. The village of Elmswell, and the man who had helped it find its way, would continue to grow, to evolve, to change. And in that change, they would always remember the lesson they had learned together. That peace, when shared and nurtured, could be the foundation for everything else. And as the last light of day faded into the night, Sir Alden, once a knight of battle, now a quiet leader, found peace in knowing that his journey had led him to exactly where he was meant to be. The end.